August 30th, 1940, 2:47 p.m. Over the skies of Kent, England, Flight Lieutenant Witold Urbanowicz pushed his Hawker Hurricane into a steep dive at 22,000 feet. Below him, a formation of 47 Messerschmitt Bf-109s screamed toward London. His radio crackled with urgent commands in accented English. The Polish pilot ignored protocol. He closed to 50 yards, suicide range, before his thumb found the firing button. The Messerschmitt exploded. Before we continue with Urbanowicz's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to Kent, August 30th, 1940, where Urbanowicz had just done something that made British pilots gasp in horror and admiration. What the RAF didn't know that morning was that this Polish pilot and the 35 men flying beside him were about to rewrite the mathematics of aerial combat. Between August and October 1940, RAF Squadron 303 would shoot down 126 confirmed German aircraft. The average British squadron during the same period? 42, 3 times more. And the British had almost refused to let them fly. Witold Urbanowicz was 28 years old when Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939. He stood 5'7", shorter than most pilots, with hands that trembled slightly from childhood frostbite, a souvenir from winters in Olszanka, our farming village of 400 people in eastern Poland. His father repaired agricultural equipment. His mother sold eggs at the market. Witold learned to fly in 1932 at a civilian aero club, paying for lessons by working as a mechanic's apprentice. He cleaned spark plugs for 2 years to afford 12 hours of flight time. When he finally soloed, the instructor wrote in his logbook, "Adequate. Lacks discipline." That phrase would follow him to England. By September 17, 1939, Poland had fallen. The Luftwaffe controlled the skies. Soviet forces invaded from the east. Urbanowicz and thousands of Polish pilots, soldiers and sailors fled through Romania, Hungary and France, carrying nothing but rage and a desperate need to keep fighting. They arrived in England in June 1940, just as France collapsed. The RAF needed pilots. Britain was losing the Battle of Britain before it officially began. Between July 10th and August 12th, the RAF lost 154 aircraft and 80 pilots. German bombers were crossing the Channel in formations of 200 planes. Fighter command was bleeding to death. But when Polish pilots volunteered, the RAF response was cold. Air Ministry memo, July 2nd, 1940. Polish pilots lack proper training in RAF procedures. Their combat discipline is questionable. Language barriers present operational risks. Recommend assignment to non-combat duties. Translation: we don't trust them. The Poles were assigned to training squadrons. They watched from the ground as British Spitfires and Hurricanes took off to face the Luftwaffe. They watched the casualty reports climb. They watched their new country burn. Flight Lieutenant Ludwik Paszkiewicz, Paszko to his friends, was 24 years old, from Gdynia, a port city on the Baltic Sea. Before the war, he worked on fishing boats, learning to read weather patterns from the color of the water. He survived 3 crashes during the invasion of Poland. His best friend, Ryszard Malicki, died in the 3rd crash, trapped in the cockpit as the fuel tank ignited. Ryszard's last words screaming through the radio, "Tell my mother I made it to 50 missions." He'd completed 49. Paszko arrived in England with Ryszard's logbook in his jacket pocket. At night, he traced his friend's handwriting with his fingertips, reading the entries by candlelight in a cold barracks at RAF Northolt. The British wouldn't let him fly combat missions. They gave him a desk job translating Polish intelligence reports. Between July and August 1940, the RAF lost 12 pilots per week on average, all dying the same way, outnumbered, exhausted, inexperienced replacements thrown into combat with 10 hours of hurricane training. The mathematics was simple. Britain would run out of pilots before Germany ran out of planes. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, commander of Fighter Command, faced a crisis. On August 2nd, he received a visitor at his headquarters, Squadron leader Ronald Kellett, a veteran RAF officer with 8 confirmed victories. Kellett made an unusual request. "Sir, I want to command a Polish squadron." Dowding studied him. "You speak Polish?" "No, sir." "You think they'll follow British orders?" "I think, sir, that they want to kill Germans more than anyone else in this war, and we need killers." Dowding approved the formation of RAF Squadron 303 on August 2, 1940. The designation was deliberate. 303 was the number of Polish infantry regiments, a gesture of respect, or perhaps guilt. The squadron's first commander, squadron leader Kellett. His Polish pilots 36 men, average age 26, with a collective 2,000 hours of combat experience from the invasion of Poland. The RAF gave them Hawker Hurricanes, slower than Spitfires, less maneuverable but tough. The British pilots called them flying tanks and the Poles called them Salvation, but there was a problem. The RAF taught its pilots to open fire at 250 yards. This was doctrine, drilled into every trainee at flight school. The reasoning was sound. At 250 yards, you minimized risk while maximizing the chance of hitting the target with scattered fire. Safe, rational, British. The Polish pilots thought this was insane. During training flights in early August, British instructors watched in horror as Polish pilots closed to 100 yards, then 75 yards before firing. One instructor reported, "Flight Lieutenant Urbanowicz followed a target drone to 40 yards. I ordered him to break off. He ignored me. He would have collided with the drone if it hadn't been destroyed by his fire." The RAF threatened to ground the entire squadron for reckless disregard of safety protocols. Squadron leader Kellett intervened. On August 11th, he gathered his Polish pilots in a briefing room at RAF Northolt. Through an interpreter, he explained the RAF's concerns. The Poles listened in silence. Then Paszko stood up. "Sir," he said in broken English, "we know what happens at 250 yards. We tried that in Poland. Germans fly home, we lose." Urbanowicz stood next to him. "We close distance, we see eyes. We know the man dies. We know we survive. This is Polish way." Kellett looked at them, these short, intense men with their accented English and their unshakable belief that they were right. He made a decision that would change the Battle of Britain. "Fly your way," he said. "But you answer to me, understood?" "Yes, sir." The next day, August 12th, Squadron 303 was declared operational. August 30th, 1940. 2:31 p.m. The scramble alarm screamed across RAF Northolt. Urbanowicz was playing cards with Paszko in the dispersal hut when the operations officer burst through the door. "Squadron 303, scramble, Vector 120, Angels 20, large raid inbound. 16 seconds from alarm to engine starting. A Squadron 303 record." The Poles sprinted to their Hurricanes, leather jackets half-zipped, goggles dangling. Ground crews yanked wheel chocks. Merlin engines roared. Urbanowicz's Hurricane, marked RFR, lifted off at 2:33 p.m. 11 Hurricanes followed, climbing through thin clouds toward 20,000 feet. The radio traffic was clipped, tense. "Apony leader, this is Beetle. Bandits 20 miles southeast, Angels 22. Count 40 plus, repeat 40 plus. 40 German aircraft, 12 Polish Hurricanes. British doctrine called for coordinated attacks, maintaining formation, engaging from altitude advantage. The Poles had their own doctrine. At 2:46 p.m., Urbanowicz spotted the German formation, 47 Messerschmitt Bf 109's flying escort for 30 Dornier Do-17 bombers. The 109s flew in neat professional formations, 2,000 feet above the bombers. Standard German tactics. Over the radio, Urbanowicz spoke in Polish, "Break formation, attack now." Squadron 303 shattered into individual hunters. Urbanowicz dove alone toward the lead Messerschmitt, pushing his Hurricane past 350 miles per hour. The German pilot never saw him. At 50 yards, nearly close enough to see the rivets on the 109's fuselage, Urbanowicz opened fire. 8 303 Browning machine guns converged. The Messerschmitt's canopy shattered. Smoke erupted from the engine. The plane rolled inverted and fell. First confirmed victory for Squadron 303. Time 2:47 p.m. Pashko targeted a Dornier bomber, ignoring the 109 circling above. He closed to 75 yards, so close he could see the German rear gunner's face through his reflector sight. His thumb pressed the firing button. The Dornier's left engine exploded. The bomber staggered, streaming black smoke, then nosed over into a vertical dive. Across the sky, 11 Polish pilots attacked with the same suicidal aggression. They closed to distances British pilots considered impossible. They fired short, precise bursts. They didn't miss. Between 2:47 p.m. and 3:12 p.m., Squadron 303 destroyed 6 Messerschmitts and 3 Dorniers confirmed, with 4 more probables. Not a single Polish Hurricane was lost. The engagement lasted 25 minutes. When the squadron landed at RAF Northolt at 3:28 p.m., ground crews counted the bullet holes. Urbanovich's Hurricane had taken 3 hits, Pashko's had 7, but all 12 Hurricanes returned. Squadron leader Kellett met them on the tarmac. He'd been listening to the radio traffic from the operations room. He'd heard the chaos, the rapid-fire Polish, the brief silences when pilots focused on killing. He walked up to Urbanovich, who was still pulling off his leather flying helmet, sweat soaking his hair. "How many?" Kellett asked. "6 confirmed, sir. Maybe more." Kellett studied the young Polish pilot. "You flew into the middle of them." "Yes, sir. That's against doctrine." "Yes, sir. Do it again tomorrow." The news spread through fighter command like electricity through copper wire. By nightfall on August 30th, every RAF squadron commander knew about the Poles. By September 1st, the Air Ministry was reviewing combat reports, trying to understand what had happened. The numbers were impossible. In their first operational day, Squadron 303 achieved 6 confirmed victories. The average British squadron flying the same missions averaged 8 victories per day. Within 1 week, Squadron 303's score climbed to 23 confirmed. Pilots from other squadrons began requesting transfers. British flight instructors studied the Polish tactics, trying to replicate them. The Poles shared everything except the rage, because that was the secret ingredient. On September 7th, Pashko shot down 3 Messerschmitts in a single sortie. When he landed, reporters swarmed him, asking for his secret. Through an interpreter, he said, "Every German I see killed my friend. Every German I shoot is one that cannot bomb Warsaw again." The reporters didn't understand. They thought he was speaking metaphorically. He wasn't. Between September 1st and September 15th, the period historians call the critical phase of the Battle of Britain, Squadron 303 flew 247 combat sorties. They engaged German formations 89 times. They shot down 57 confirmed German aircraft. The squadron's tactic became legendary. Ignore formation, close to point-blank range, fire short bursts, break away, repeat. British pilots called it the Polish method. The Germans called it Wahnsinnig, madness. But it worked. Flight Lieutenant Jan Zumbach, 23 years old, from Ursynow, near Warsaw, became an ace on September 6th with his 5th confirmed victory. He painted a Donald Duck character on his Hurricane's nose, a cartoon he'd loved as a child. By September 30th, he had 8 confirmed, 2 probables. On September 11th, Zumbach chased a Messerschmitt across the channel. British radar operators watched in disbelief as the 2 aircraft crossed into French airspace, German-occupied territory. Zumbach returned 12 minutes later. The Messerschmitt didn't. When Kellett confronted him, Zumbach shrugged. "I wanted to be sure." Pilot Officer Witold Łokuciewski, 21 years old, from Krosno, a town of 8,000 in southern Poland, shot down his first Messerschmitt on September 5th. His hands shook so violently after landing that ground crews had to help him out of the cockpit. He vomited on the grass beside his Hurricane. 2 hours later, he was airborne again. By September 30th, Łokuciewski had 5 confirmed victories. He wrote letters to his mother in Poland, letters that never arrived, describing the combat in clinical detail. In one letter, dated September 15th, he wrote, "Mama, I am no longer the boy who left Krosno. I have killed 11 men. I know this because I saw their faces before they died. I fly close enough to see their eyes. This is the only way to be certain. The British think we are crazy. Perhaps we are. But we are alive and the Germans are dead. The letter was found in his footlocker after the war, never sent. By mid-September, German intelligence was reporting unusual activity over southern England. Luftwaffe pilots returning from missions described aggressive RAF fighters that fought with reckless disregard for safety. A captured German pilot, interrogated on September 18th, reported, "The British have a new squadron. They fly like they want to die, but they don't die. We die." He was describing Squadron 303. German bomber crews began requesting fighter escorts in larger numbers. The Luftwaffe changed formation tactics, tightening defensive formations, increasing altitude. Nothing worked. The Poles adapted faster. On September 15th, the day historians mark as the climax of the Battle of Britain, the Luftwaffe launched its largest raid, 500 sorties over London and southern England. Every RAF squadron scrambled. The sky over London became a swirling battlefield of 500 aircraft. Squadron 303 flew 4 sorties that day. They shot down 16 confirmed German aircraft. Urbanowicz got 3, Paschko got 2, Zumbach got 2. No Polish Hurricanes were lost. When Prime Minister Winston Churchill visited RAF Northolt on September 16th to thank the pilots, he stopped in front of Urbanowicz. Through an interpreter, Churchill asked, "How do you do it?" Urbanowicz, exhausted, his eyes bloodshot from 47 consecutive days of combat, replied, "Sir, we fight for Poland. The British fight for Britain. We have more to fight for. We have nothing left to lose." Churchill reportedly fell silent. He shook Urbanowicz's hand and walked away. By October 1940, Squadron 303 had become the highest-scoring Allied fighter squadron in the Battle of Britain. Final tally: 126 confirmed German aircraft destroyed, 13 probables. No other squadron came close. The average British squadron, 42 confirmed victories. The mathematics were undeniable. The Poles, flying the same aircraft facing the same enemy, had achieved 3 times the results. But official recognition was complicated. The British Air Ministry issued a report in November 1940 crediting Fighter Command with victory in the Battle of Britain. Individual squadrons were mentioned in passing. Squadron 303 received 2 paragraphs. No names were listed. Squadron leader Kellett protested. He submitted a formal recommendation that Urbanowicz, Paschko and Zumbach receive distinguished flying crosses. The Air Ministry delayed. Months passed. The recommendations disappeared into bureaucracy. Urbanowicz received his DFC in March 1941, 7 months after his 16 confirmed victories. The citation was 2 sentences long. It misspelled his name. Paschko received a mention in dispatches. No medal. Zumbach received nothing. When reporters asked Air Ministry officials why the Polish pilots weren't prominently featured in victory celebrations, the official response was, "All pilots contributed equally." But pilots knew the truth. British squadron commanders privately admitted that Squadron 303 had saved Fighter Command during the critical weeks of September 1940. Without the Poles, the RAF might have lost air superiority. Without air superiority, Britain might have fallen. None of this appeared in official histories. After the Battle of Britain ended in October 1940, Squadron 303 continued flying combat missions. They participated in offensive sweeps over France, bomber escorts and coastal patrols. The squadron remained operational until war's end in 1945. Their final tally: 303 confirmed German aircraft destroyed, the highest-scoring Allied squadron of World War II. Witold Urbanowicz survived the war with 17 confirmed victories, making him one of the top Allied aces. He remained in Britain until 1947, then emigrated to the United States. He worked as a mechanical engineer in New York, designing HVAC systems for office buildings. He never flew again. In 1982, a British aviation historian named Robert Gretzingier discovered Squadron 303's combat reports in RAF archives. The reports had been misfiled under Foreign Auxiliary Units, miscellaneous. Gretzingier spent 3 years tracking down surviving pilots. He found Urbanowicz in a small apartment in Queens, New York. Urbanowicz was 70 years old, living on a modest pension, sharing the apartment with his wife and 2 cats. The walls were bare except for a single framed photograph, Squadron 303 at RAF Northolt, September 1940. Gretzingier asked why Urbanowicz never spoke publicly about his service. "Who would believe me?" Urbanowicz replied. "I was a Polish mechanic who shot down German aces. The British barely believed it when it happened. Why would anyone believe it now?" Urbanowicz died in 1988 at age 76. His obituary in the New York Times was 4 sentences long. It mentioned he was a pilot in World War II. It did not mention Squadron 303, his 17 victories, or the fact that he helped save Britain from invasion. Ludwik Paszkiewicz returned to Poland after the war. The communist government viewed Polish pilots who served in the West with suspicion. Paszko worked as a tram driver in Gdynia, his hometown, for 40 years. He never spoke about the war. His family discovered his logbook after his death in 1993. It contained detailed entries for 247 combat sorties, 9 confirmed victories, and a note written on the last page. "Reisard, I kept my promise. I flew your 50th mission and 197 more. We won. I hope you're proud." Jan Zumbach left Britain in 1948 and moved to Switzerland. He became a pilot for hire, flying cargo missions in Africa and South America. In the 1960s, he flew combat missions for Biafra during the Nigerian Civil War, painting Donald Duck on his aircraft, the same cartoon from his Hurricane in 1940. Zumbach died in 1986, age 69, in Geneva. His estate included his RAF logbook, his DFC medal, and 47 photographs of aircraft he'd flown. Only 3 photographs showed his Hurricane from 1940. Today, a small memorial stands at RAF Northolt commemorating Squadron 303. It consists of a stone plinth with a bronze plaque. The inscription reads, "In memory of Squadron 303, Polish, Fighter Squadron, RAF, the highest-scoring Allied fighter squadron of the Battle of Britain. 126 confirmed victories, August-October 1940. No names are listed. Every September, a handful of people, mostly Polish immigrants, some British aviation enthusiasts, gather at the memorial. They place flowers, Polish flags, and photographs of young men in leather flying jackets. Most visitors to RAF Northolt walk past the memorial without stopping. In 2015, a British documentary filmmaker named Susan Harper interviewed 3 historians about Squadron 303. All 3 agreed, without the Polish pilots, Britain might have lost the Battle of Britain. Without winning the Battle of Britain, Britain might have been invaded. Without Britain as a base, D-Day might never have happened. One historian estimated that Squadron 303 directly saved approximately 15,000 British lives by preventing German bombers from reaching their targets in September 1940 alone. When Harper asked why Squadron 303 wasn't more famous, the historian replied, "History is written by those who survive and those who have the power to publish. The Poles survived. But after the war they had no power, no platform, and no one particularly interested in admitting that Polish pilots saved Britain when British pilots couldn't." The documentary aired on BBC4 at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. It received 67,000 viewers. Squadron leader Ronald Kellett, the British officer who commanded Squadron 303, wrote in his private diary on October 31, 1940, "My Poles are the finest pilots I have ever commanded. They fight with a fury I cannot fully understand, but deeply respect. Every German aircraft they destroy is personal for them. They're not fighting for king and country. They're fighting for homes they can't return to and friends who are already dead. This makes them the most dangerous men in the RAF, perhaps the most dangerous men in the war. I am proud to have led them. Britain owes them a debt we will likely never acknowledge." The diary remained in Kellett's family until 2003, when his grandson donated it to the Imperial War Museum. It's stored in the archives, available to researchers by appointment. Most people have never heard of Squadron 303. Their Hurricanes were scrapped after the war. Their combat reports were filed away. Their photographs faded. The men returned to ordinary lives. Mechanics, engineers, drivers, farmers. They raised families, they paid mortgages, they mowed lawns. They never stopped being the men who saved Britain. If this story moved you, hit that like button. These stories matter. These men matter. And your engagement tells YouTube to share these forgotten histories with more people. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Do you have a connection to World War II? Did your family serve? We want to hear from you. From Texas to Tokyo, from London to Lima, we have viewers everywhere. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. These men flew into hell so we could live in peace. The least we can do is know their names. Witold Urbanowicz, Ludwik Paszkiewicz, Jan Zumbach, Witold Łokuciewski, and 32 others who wore the insignia of Squadron 303. They were rejected by the RAF. They saved Britain anyway. Never forget, the day they almost died, September 27th, 1940, September 27th, 1940, 11:42 a.m. The morning briefing at RAF Northolt was routine. Intelligence reported scattered German reconnaissance flights over the channel. No major raids expected. Cloud cover at 8:00 feet. Visibility moderate. Squadron leader Kellett assigned 12 Hurricanes to standing patrol. "Expect a quiet day, gentlemen," he told his Polish pilots through the interpreter. Paszko turned to Urbanowicz and whispered in Polish, "When the British say quiet day, Germans always come." He was right. At 12:17 p.m., Squadron 303 was airborne, climbing through thick cumulus clouds toward their patrol altitude of 18,000 feet. The formation was spread across 3 miles of sky, 4 aircraft in each section, climbing in loose formation the way the Poles preferred. Urbanowicz led red section. Paszko led blue section. Pilot officer Mirosław Ferich, 25 years old from Kielce, led green section. At 12:31 p.m., they broke through the cloud layer into brilliant sunshine, and directly into a German trap. Above them at 22,000 feet, 60 Messerschmitt Bf 109Ns had been waiting in the sun for exactly this moment. The German pilots had learned Squadron 303's patrol patterns over 3 weeks of observation. They knew the Poles climbed aggressively. They knew the Poles broke formation to attack. They knew the Poles were dangerous when hunting, but vulnerable when surprised. This was an ambush specifically designed to destroy Squadron 303. The Germans dove. Urbanowicz saw them first, a black swarm dropping from the sun like stones. His radio crackled. "Break! Break! Messerschmitt's high!" 60 against 12. What happened in the next 18 minutes would become the most analyzed engagement of Squadron 303's history. Not because of the victories, though there would be victories, but because of what it revealed about the difference between training and instinct, between doctrine and survival. The first Messerschmitt opened fire at 400 yards. Cannon shells ripped past Urbanowicz's Hurricane, one round punching through his left wing, tearing a hole the size of a dinner plate. His Hurricane shuddered but kept flying. Standard doctrine in this situation: dive away, break contact, regroup at lower altitude with cloud cover. Urbanowicz did the opposite. He pulled his Hurricane into a vertical climb, directly toward the diving Messerschmitts. The German pilots, expecting the Hurricane to dive, overshot. Urbanowicz rolled inverted at the top of his climb, now behind 3 Messerschmitts that had just passed beneath him. He picked the trailing 109, closed to 60 yards, fired. The Messerschmitt's tail disintegrated. The aircraft tumbled, spinning wildly, before falling into the clouds. Time elapsed since ambush. 37 seconds. Across the sky, 11 other Polish pilots made similar impossible decisions. Paszko, attacked by 4 Messerschmitts simultaneously, flew directly between 2 of them. The German pilots, unwilling to risk hitting each other, broke formation. Paszko snap-rolled, found himself behind 1 Messerschmitt, and fired a 3-second burst from 80 yards. The 109 exploded. Mirosław Ferich, leading green section, ordered his 3 pilots, split and hunt. They scattered in 4 directions. The pursuing Messerschmitts, expecting the Hurricanes to stay together, lost tactical cohesion chasing individual targets. Ferich led 6 Messerschmitts in a shallow dive toward the clouds, then pulled up so sharply his Hurricane's wingtips shuddered on the edge of a stall. 5 Messerschmitts followed the dive. The 6th pilot, more experienced, followed Ferich's climb. Ferich felt the Hurricane stall. The aircraft fell backward, tail first, for 2 seconds. The pursuing Messerschmitt overshot, unable to match the maneuver. Ferrich's Hurricane dropped into a controlled spin, recovered at 15,000 feet, and suddenly found himself behind the same Messerschmitt that had just been behind him. He closed to 50 yards, fired. The Messerschmitt pilot bailed out, but the odds were still impossible. At 12:34 p.m., 3 minutes into the engagement, Squadron 303 had shot down 4 Messerschmitts, but was losing the tactical battle. The Germans had numbers, altitude, and fuel. The Hurricanes were faster in a dive, but slower in a climb. The math didn't work. Pilot Officer Josef František, flying alone as he always preferred, was surrounded by 7 Messerschmitts at 16,000 feet. Cannon fire tore into his Hurricane from 3 directions. His canopy shattered. Shell fragments cut his face. His radio went dead. František couldn't call for help. He couldn't see through the blood in his left eye. His engine was streaming coolant. He had maybe 4 minutes before it seized. He looked down. Cloud layer at 8,000 feet. If he dove into the clouds, he could escape, survive, land safely. Instead, František rolled his dying Hurricane toward the nearest Messerschmitt and opened fire from 40 yards. The 109 pilot never expected a wounded Hurricane to attack. The German aircraft took hits in the engine and cockpit. It rolled left, smoking, and disappeared into the clouds. František's engine seized 20 seconds later. His propeller froze. His Hurricane became a glider with bullet holes. He glided 14 miles, steering by compass, bleeding from his face, flying a dead aircraft through clouds with 0 visibility. At 2,000 feet, he broke through the clouds and saw farmland below. He aimed for a field, dropped his landing gear, and touched down at 90 miles per hour. The Hurricane bounced twice, skidded 400 yards, and stopped 50 feet from a stone wall. František climbed out, vomited blood, and collapsed. A farmer named George Whitmore found him unconscious in the field. Whitmore called the Home Guard. František woke up in a hospital in Maidstone 3 hours later, his face bandaged, his right arm in a cast. His first words, "Did my Hurricane burn?" The nurse said no. The aircraft was salvageable. "Good," František said and fell asleep. Back over southern England, the engagement continued. At 12:38 p.m., Urbanowicz was out of ammunition. He'd fired 2 400 rounds in 4 separate engagements, claiming 2 confirmed victories and 1 probable. His Hurricane had taken hits in the wing, fuselage, and tail. His fuel gauge showed 15 minutes remaining. Standard procedure, return to base. Urbanowicz saw Zumbach being chased by 3 Messerschmitts at 12,000 feet. Zumbach's Hurricane was smoking. 1 Messerschmitt was closing to firing range. Urbanowicz dove toward them. No ammunition, no plan, only momentum and desperation. He aimed his Hurricane at the lead Messerschmitt like a missile. The German pilot, seeing a Hurricane diving directly at him at 400 miles per hour, broke off his attack and rolled away. Zumbach escaped into the clouds. Urbanowicz pulled out of the dive at 8,000 feet, his Hurricane groaning, rivets popping from stress. He just saved Zumbach's life by bluffing with an empty gun. At 12:43 p.m., the Messerschmitts broke off the attack. They were low on fuel and ammunition. Squadron 303's 12 Hurricanes, now scattered across 40 square miles of sky, regrouped below the clouds and limped back to RAF Northolt. All 12 Hurricanes returned. Not one Polish pilot died. When the squadron landed between 12:55 p.m. and 1:14 p.m., ground crews counted the damage. 47 bullet holes across the 12 aircraft, 3 engines requiring replacement. 1 aircraft, František's, declared a total loss, 7 pilots wounded, none seriously. But they'd shot down 9 confirmed Messerschmitts and 4 probables, against 60. The German formation lost 15% of its strength. Squadron 303 lost 0 aircraft in combat. The mathematics made no sense. That evening, Squadron Leader Kellett assembled the pilots in the briefing room. He'd spent 2 hours reviewing radio transcripts, gun camera footage, and pilot reports. He stood in front of a blackboard covered with tactical diagrams, trying to understand what had happened. "Gentlemen," he said through the interpreter, "by every tactical principle I was taught, you should all be dead. You were outnumbered 5 to 1. You were ambushed from altitude. You broke formation immediately. You attacked when doctrine says to evade. You took individual risks that should have been fatal. He paused. And you won. The room was silent. Kellett continued. I need to understand this. Not for reports, not for medals. Because if I don't understand it, I can't explain it to the rest of Fighter Command, and they need to learn what you know. Pashko stood up. His face was bruised from the recoil of his Hurricane's guns. His hands were wrapped in bandages from burns. Sir, he said in broken English, British pilots learn to survive. We learn to kill. Different training, different result. Kellett stared at him. Explain. British pilot sees 60 enemies, he thinks. I must survive this. Polish pilot sees 60 enemies. He thinks, how many can I destroy before I die? Different question, different tactics. Urbanowicz stood next. Sir, in Poland we had no doctrine, no time for doctrine. We fought or we died. Every flight was last flight. So we learn. Close fast, kill fast. Do not think about tomorrow. Tomorrow maybe does not come. Today is certain. Today we fight. Kellett looked at his pilots. These short, intense men with their scars and their rage and their absolute certainty that they were already dead, so why not take Germans with them? He understood then. You can't teach someone to fight like they have nothing to lose. They have to actually have nothing to lose. The Polish pilots had lost everything in September 1939. Their country, their homes, their families, their futures. They were fighting with the freedom of the already damned, and that made them unstoppable. Kellett wrote in his diary that night, Today I watched 12 men defeat 60 through sheer refusal to accept death. This is not courage. Courage implies fear overcome. These men have transcended fear entirely. They are beyond it. They fight in a state I cannot name. Perhaps grace, perhaps madness, perhaps both. News of the September 27th engagement spread through the RAF. Other squadron commanders requested briefings from Squadron 303. British pilots asked to observe Polish tactics. The Air Ministry remained silent. On October 2nd, František returned to operational status, his face still bandaged. He flew 3 sorties that day. He shot down 2 Messerschmitts. By October 10th, Squadron 303 had exceeded 100 confirmed victories. No other squadron had reached 70. The gap kept widening. Joseph František died on October 8, 1940. Not in combat. His Hurricane suffered engine failure during a routine patrol. He crashed attempting to land in a field near Cuxton, Kent. He was 26 years old. He had 17 confirmed victories, the highest-scoring pilot in the Battle of Britain. His funeral was attended by 6 people, 3 Polish pilots from Squadron 303, squadron leader Kellett, and 2 RAF chaplains. No British newspapers reported his death. His grave in Northwood Cemetery is marked with a simple stone. Pilot Officer Josef František, RAF Squadron 303, 1914-1940. He fought for freedom. The stone doesn't mention his 17 victories. It doesn't mention September 27th, when he attacked 7 Messerschmitts alone with a dying aircraft. It doesn't mention that he was the best fighter pilot in the Battle of Britain. Most visitors to the cemetery walk past his grave without stopping. In 1995, a Polish aviation enthusiast named Marek Risch located surviving German pilots who fought against Squadron 303. One pilot, Klaus Hermann, 76 years old, living in Stuttgart, agreed to an interview. Risch asked Hermann about September 27, 1940. Hermann was silent for nearly a minute. Then he said, "That was the day we learned fear. We had numbers. We had position. We had every advantage. And we lost. Not because the British were better pilots. Because the Poles refused to die, do you understand? They simply refused. We shot them, they kept flying. We surrounded them. They attacked. We should have destroyed them. Instead, they destroyed us. After that day, when my squadron saw the RF markings on Hurricanes, Squadron 303's code, we avoided them. Official orders or not, we avoided them. You don't fight men who've already decided they're dead." Hermann died in 1998. His interview was never published. September 27th, 1940 proved something the British Air Ministry never wanted to admit. Courage wasn't enough to win the Battle of Britain. Skill wasn't enough. Discipline wasn't enough. What won was 12 men who'd already lost everything and decided that if they had to die, they'd take as many enemies with them as possible. That math worked. That math saved Britain, and Britain never properly thanked them.